Hi, and welcome back to the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series as IDM my group of players at my friendly local game store through Out of the Abyss, which is the 5th edition Underdark adventure for Dungeons and Dragons. Thanks so much for watching, whether you're a first time watcher or you're a return viewer. Appreciate it very, very much. So get right into things here. Got some viewer feedback I want to go through, and then we'll get into what happened this week. Um, just as a reminder, at the end of last week, they had defeated the Medusa. They had cleansed the temple, and they had gone out and got blessings from Gurnik, the Deep Gnome cleric. They had gone and sold earth and elemental remains to the Emerald Enclave. They had picked up a new party member at the Foaming Mug and things like that, and they were about to head back into the Rockblight. So that's where we'll pick up. But first, I do have some viewer feedback. First of all, I got Rob Plummer. One of the things I talked about on last week's video was one of my players who's plays a spellcaster wanting to craft magical items during the adventure as if it was downtime activities. There's rules in the player's handbook and the dungeon master's guide for downtime activities, where stuff you can do basically between adventures, crafting, building a stronghold, running a business, that sort of thing. And this character wanted to do that while the adventure was in full swing. So what I had said was, well, maybe crafting that would be somewhat possible, but would take double or triple or quadruple the amount of normal time depending on what's going on with the adventure, because you're supposed to have a full 8 hours a day in addition to your rest to work basically on these downtime activities. So I had said, well, maybe we can work out kind of a compromise. And Rob Plummer, who sounds like is also a DM, said basically he put his head together with one of his players wanting to craft a wand, and that's also what they came up with. That it's just going to take longer because you don't have that full time, and I think that's a good way to do it. Now, there's some stuff I don't see how you could build a stronghold in the middle of the adventure or run a business. Maybe you could say that you're getting dispatches from other people and telling them what to do and sending the messages back and that sort of thing. But then again, I think it should take longer because you're not right there in the middle of it. So, Ferbs178 pointed out that I incorrectly calculated how much the Earth Elemental remains were worth to the Emerald Enclave, and I did. So DMs, GMs, when you goof up, if it's just straight up, you could just say, hey, sorry, I goofed up and let me fix that. So what I did was the Emerald Enclave, if you, in Blingdenstone and the Rockblight and all that, if you fight an Earth Elemental that has fallen under the influence of Ogremok's Bane and has gone crazy, if you defeat it and bring remains of that elemental to the Emerald Enclave to study, they will give you 10 gold piece per hit die. And so the players in the previous video brought the remains of um, 3 earth elementals. And just in my head, I even searched on this and got the wrong answer. I said, is the challenge rating the same as the hit die? And I found a search result that said, yep, but that's not the case. The hit die is actually listed very clearly in the attributes for the monster, for each monster in the monster manual. And earth elementals actually have 12 hit dice per earth elemental, not 5, even though they're CR5. So I calculated 150 gold pieces, CR5 times 3, when in actuality it should be 12 hit dice times 3. So I gave them 150 gold pieces when I should have given them a 360. So I corrected that with my party at the beginning of last session, and thank you for that heads up, Ferbs. That one I just completely goofed on, right over my head. I should have caught that, but thank you. Let's see here. Had Bradley Higgins did a callback to one of my videos a while back. I think episode number 27, video number 27. I think this one is 39, where he was talking about my alignment notes and that I felt that alignment wasn't just a moral spectrum that you could choose, but there were cosmic, even deity forces, if you will, behind these alignments. So when you say you're lawful good, it's not just saying I'm going to try to be. I mean, there's actual deeper forces within the fantasy world of the Forgotten Realms of Dungeons and Dragons behind that. So if you declare an alignment and then don't behave in a way that follows that alignment, eventually as a DM, I will start saying you're having gameplay results from that. You may start having disadvantage, or you may have some attributes that temporarily go down, because it kind of represents this inner conflict between what you say you are and how you're really being. So cognitive dissonance, all these other things. So and one thing I said was, that's something I do to encourage people to pay attention to their alignment. And then, Bradley pointed out, said, well, people can change. And that's one thing I don't think I mentioned back in episode number 27. Yes, I will absolutely allow somebody to change their alignment. That's one of the ways to correct what's happening. Like if you say I'm lawful good, but you're acting chaotic neutral, right? Then there's going to be some inner conflict there. But if you end up saying, okay, and I declare I'm chaotic neutral now, and that's how I'm going to play my character, then that's a resolution. Another resolution would be to, oh, well, I would prefer to be chaotic good, not, true neutral or whatever. And so I'm going to attempt to play chaotic good again. So I'm not necessarily trying to force people into any particular alignment, but I am trying to encourage to play the alignment that you choose and declare, because I think it's part of the game. Alignment has been part of D&D since like the very beginning, pretty much. And if players and DMs want to get rid of alignment, that's fine. I personally like alignment. I think it adds a dimension to the role playing. And again, yeah, in the real world, there's gray areas. Nobody, everybody's gray. Even though I can say, hey, I think I'm in real life, Shane thinks he's neutral good, whatever. I'm just throwing something out there. Chaotic good. I'd probably try to identify as chaotic good in real life. People are more complex than that. And really good people can have a little bit of bad in them, and really bad people can have a little bit of good in them. I get all that. Not to mention theologically, I could get into all kinds of stuff about my, beliefs in Christianity and that sort of thing. But that's not what I'm trying to go for here. This is a fantasy world. It's a fantasy world. So I think it's okay to have alignment. And I think it's totally okay to say that like all orcs are chaotic evil or lawful evil. I think that's okay because it's fantasy. I don't necessarily have to have the moral complexity within my fantasy villains that the real world would have. That's my own personal choice. Okay. Other groups and DMs will do it different. Okay. So that's just how I think it's totally fine to say this guy's just evil. He's just evil. He knows he's evil. He doesn't think he's the hero of it. He's just evil. He's just evil. He wants to destroy everything just because some people want to watch the world burn, just to say it, watch it burn. So that's kind of my take on it. So I just want to clarify, and I'm glad Bradley brought it up, that yeah, you can change alignment. You're not locked into the alignment you choose, but the way I personally DM, again, if somebody declares an alignment and then does not play that alignment, I will step in and start doing stuff to address that for role-playing purposes, not just to be, the DM with the iron fist. So let's see, what else did I have going on here? I thought that there was a couple of other things to mention here. No, I think that's it for the viewer feedback. I got a really nice graph. Jinja Standart, I think I'm saying that right. If I'm saying that wrong, I apologize. Says, you are the reason I can play D&D properly. Thank you. Wow, that's a pretty mighty big compliment. Not pretty mighty, that's a mighty big compliment. I appreciate you saying that, and I'm glad that you get that kind of value out of these videos. Just remember that even though there are rules to D&D, properly can be kind of a flexible term. So, but if you feel that the way I DM and the notes I give help you to play properly, or the way you want to play, that's a really amazing compliment, and I really appreciate that. So, I think that's it for viewer feedback. Gonna go ahead and move forward now. I'll try to be better about folding viewer feedback into the videos from this point forward, I get a lot of feedback, and I'll go, hey, somebody mentioned this and that. I'm gonna try to be more purposeful about giving people credit. So, game wise, a couple of things to mention. Like I said, they were at the foaming mug about to go back into the Rockblight. And the last couple of sessions, even though they've been running all over the place, I haven't done random encounters, but I'm probably going to start doing random encounters again in Blingdenstone just for the fun of it, because Blingdenstone has some fun random encounters, and you want to reinforce that it's an old city that they're reclaiming. So they're, even though it's like somewhat civilized, it's still dangerous. And at any moment, random encounters can happen between ghosts and Zorn and elementals and this and that, and all this other kind of crazy stuff. Uh, but one thing to mention, one of my players that had played once and then didn't come back for a couple of weeks came back. This is one of the players. I had two players that basically in one night we duplicated Eldith, the Dwarven scout NPC, and they both played a version of Eldith just to have a temporary character. And one of those players came back, and I went over last video how I worked them into the group. And then the other one came back and wants to be part of things. So basically what I did, last video I said that the Diggermatox, which are the husband and wife chiefs basically of, they're leaders in all but official name only of Blingdenstone, basically said, hey, we this person showed up and was seeking aid because they were on the run from the drow. So we brought them in. And oh, by the way, now they're going to be part of your party, and you need to outfit them. So kind of like saying, as long as you're here, you will fold them in. And then, so basically, I just kind of retconned that and said, well, there were two characters that did that. And it just so happens they're both dwarves, so maybe they can even mesh their backstories in together. But the basic thing is that they were slaves of the drow, taken from an above ground raiding party, and they managed to escape, and they showed up at Blingdenstone basically in their underclothes. The Blingdenstone very clearly says that if you're on the run from the drow, they'll take you in. But I added a little bit to it and said, we're going to take you in, and we'll put you up at the Foaming Mug, which is the only inn in Blingdenstone that it can accommodate foreign visitors. But you're going to have to, help us out around here. And oh, by the way, we already have this group that is running around helping us out, so we're going to hook you up with them. So I just folded the other player that joined right in, is what I did, and just said instead of one character like that waiting in the tap room, there were two. So that solved that. Now, what they ended up doing was going back into the Rockblight, and there's only two areas really. I mean, they've pretty much checked out the whole Rockblight. There's only two areas left at this point that they hadn't cleared out or fully investigated, and one was there's this overlook thing that's kind of down towards the bottom of this big residential area when you first come in, and down towards the bottom in the south there's a waterfall, and on either side of the waterfall there's these kind of stone staircases going up. And then the other area that they haven't fully cleared out is there's a room with a bunch of animated statues in it. And other than that, they've pretty much done all the Rockblight by this point. Now, what they elected to do was they wanted to go to that overlook area where you go up. And once you go up, there's a stream in a cave running down the middle of the cave, and then it's forming the waterfall. There's crystals growing on either side of the stream, and then there's a raised ledge with two more sort of stone stairways going up to this raised ledge, and there's two statues on this raised ledge. A couple of things to mention about this room are that these two statues are gargoyles, and when the characters come within 30 feet, then they immediately activate and attack. The other thing is the crystals in here and the crystal formations, really the only thing remarkable about them is some of them are big enough to hide behind, so I guess you could use them as cover. They are not worth anything, other than I guess just send them, hey, we had a battle here, let's take this as a souvenir. And they're also not the same crystals as the other area in the Rockblight where there's these crystals growing that if you look through them, you will get advantage versus being turned to stone by the Medusa. So, because they asked about that too, I said, no, these look different. So, they kept asking questions about the crystals. I don't even know why they put the crystals in here, to be quite honest. it's just kind of, oh, there's crystals here. But, the players kept asking, so I stepped out of character as the DM and said, just for game purposes, there's nothing about these crystals really, other than like they're large enough that you could get behind some of them. And so that way, every now and then, if players are just really going down a rabbit hole, and they'll do it, players will totally go down a rabbit hole that you did not expect. They will fixate on stuff, on the most minor detail, and the other stuff that is like the screaming obvious thing they need to head towards, at least from the DM's perspective, they completely blow off. So, every now and then I'll just step out from behind the veil, and I'll just say, hey guys, just so you know, there's nothing here. It's just flavor. I don't do that very often, but I do it sometimes if they're really just rabbit holing. And I did that with these crystals. So they asked a lot of questions about the statues. They made, knowledge checks, this, that, and the other. They knew metagaming that these were gargoyles by the time they asked a few questions, but I'll give them credit. They did not play as if they knew. But, all the players, it was obvious, you could tell that with the questions they were asking, they were like, we're pretty sure these are gargoyles. And they were. So they, long story short, the two gargoyles attack, and they can fly and attack and be nasty and all that stuff. And then also, I think the second round of the battle, an earth elemental rises up, and that's the fight. Now, what I did, there's a couple things that I did on this fight. One was I went ahead on the first round, just to save time. I went ahead and rolled the earth elementals initiative and went ahead and wrote it in there in the initiative order. So that way on the next round I didn't have to stop, and I just worked them right in. And the other thing it is, because the characters were kind of spaced out strategically fighting the gargoyles, because one of the gargoyles flew in, another gargoyle was still up on the ledge fighting, and of course the cleric and the bard had spaced themselves out. So I had the gargoyle in a very strategic area that they were like, whoa! So that was fun. But other than that, it wasn't an overly tough fight. It wasn't an over tough fight. They took care of business. And they said, do the gargoyles count as elementals to take the remains back to the Emerald Enclave? And I looked at the monster manual, said elemental, so I said, yeah. So they've got 3 more remains to take back to the Emerald Enclave. So that was the fight. It was a nice fight, fun fight. And then they did some role playing with the new character before they went to the Rockblight. They went back to the Rockblight. There was some discussion again at the beginning of the adventure or the session about purchasing things, and we were looking at what weapons could be purchased and what what do you call it, adventuring gear, that sort of thing. So by the time they finished the fight in the Rockblight, the session was pretty much over, other than deciding what they wanted to do next. Now, one thing I'll just note here, when it comes to characters and players keeping track of their money and their treasure and buying stuff, unless it's an unusual circumstance, like it's an exotic item or something that they may not be able to find, or just something really rare. If it's in the player's handbook and it can be bought or sold, I pretty much let them handle that. Now I'll give them notes of like when this area stuff costs double or whatever, but I give them trust until they prove me otherwise, which this group hasn't. So I say, I trust you to keep track of what you're spending and what you're buying and all that. And like one of the older, more responsible, I guess. I mean, all my group seems responsible, but one of the older players keeps track of everything in our group. So I just want to make that as a note. Other DMs may be different. Other DMs may want to see everything you buy and everything you sell and want to keep track of your treasure. I personally don't do that. But now if I feel like somebody's trying to pull one over on me, I'll get more involved. But when it comes to just mundane armor items, I just let them do their own buying and selling, and I tell them what the parameters are, whether it's something's hard to find or something costs more or whatever. And in Blingdenstone, like armor and weapons cost double. So I just want to make that note. Now, what they ended up doing, like I said, they beat the gargoyles, they beat the earth elemental, And they were like, well, we've only got one room left here, and that was that room with all those animated statues. And they were like, wow, so there was a lot of discussion and strategizing. And what they decided that they're probably going to do, and I love this plan, is they went back and got right in front and kind of looked in without activating. They were kind of, and I said, well, you can't tell exactly how many are in there, but you're guessing between 20 and 30. I think there's 32, if I remember right. Let's see. 30 statues of Drow warriors. Now, they already destroyed 9 before they retreated last time, so there's 21 in there. They don't know that, but there's 21. And there's what they started talking about. There's like, what do we do? And what they don't know is if they destroy all the animated statues, then Ogremock's Bane, this thing that we've been talking about for several weeks, will show up. And this is how you can get it to show up to disperse it. But Ogremock's Bane is weird. Ogremock's Bane, it's just a cloud. And it feels intelligence. It's like a cloud of dust that's intelligent. It feels malevolent. Yeah, malevolent. And the only way to get rid of it is a gust of wind spell or similar magic can move it. A banishment spell sends it back to the elemental plane of air. A dispel evil and good spell is equally effective. But to use that, the caster has to be in contact with the cloud. That's the only way to really get rid of this thing. And the characters aren't going to know that. So if they want to try to get rid of Ogremock's Bane, even though they're not really on a quest to do that, but this is an opportunity to do that, I don't know, do I give them Arcana checks? Do they give them intelligence checks to try to figure that out? Allow the spellcasters, because they haven't been given any guidance on how to get rid of this thing. All they know is that Ogremock's Bane, whatever the heck that is, makes the elementals go crazy. So, and Ogremock's Bane will also, any elemental, Galabdur, gargoyles, and Zorn, etc., anything from the elemental plane of earth that comes in contact with Ogremock's Bane instantly falls under its sway. The effects last as long as the enslaved elementals and Ogremock's Bane are on the same plane of existence. So I've got to think through, the sessions tomorrow night. I got to think through if Ogremock's Bane appears, what do I do? And I think that if they ask certain questions or really seem to be studying it, I think I'm going to allow the arcane. Well, I think I'll allow all spellcasters a chance to roll Arcana to figure that out, because they haven't been given any hints at all on this that I'm aware of. So anyway, if you've already run this part of the adventure, or if you have any thoughts on that, love to hear it. I probably won't. I may or may not get your feedback by the session tomorrow night. But anyway. But I love what they've strategized to do, because way back in this Lost Tomb, where there was a wraith in a Lost Tomb where you get Dawnbringer, the sentient sword. It's like, don't leave me, and the characters telepathically hear that and go inside the tomb and fight the wraith and all that. They got a necklace of fireballs. And so they were theorized, like, well, let's just throw that necklace of fireballs in there and try to take these things out, because they know how tough it is to do the wave 6 at a time fight. I thought that was a pretty good idea. So I didn't say that, but what I did is, because they were like, well, and I said, look, I'll tell you what, if you want to try that, I will just rule that they're close enough together that they would all be caught within the blast of the necklace of fireballs. One, I want to reward that because I think that's a pretty clever way to approach it. Let's just grenade it. Two, they've already gotten the point of this room that the statues animate 6 at a time. You knock out 6, if you stay in the room, here comes 6 more. You knock those out, here comes 6 more. And it's just a slog. It's just a grind. Now, if they want to grind their way through all of them, then I'll let them do that. But if they want to throw the necklace of fireball, and I'm pretty sure I rolled max. I think it has the maximum amount, which is like 1d6 plus 3. I think it has 9 of the little fireball beads. They could probably just throw like half and take them all out, but I don't know. If you're watching this, players, shame on you. But I know some of them may or may not watch it. I don't know. Hopefully they wait a couple of weeks so that they don't get spoiled too much. But I'd rather you not watch it, to be quite honest. Just like don't read ahead in the book. Anyway. Okay, having said that. But what I'll probably do, though, is if they do a mass fireball, because they're not really risking themselves, I'll probably only give them half XP for all of whatever they destroy. I think that's fair enough compromise. Because I'm just going to say, yeah, you can affect them all, throw the fireballs, and they could probably just take them all out. So that's probably what's going to happen next session. Is they're going to, you know, more than likely take out the animated statues. Which, by the way, they're drow that have been converted. That were turned to stone by the Medusa, and then the Medusa working together with Ogremok's Bane turn these into animated statues, but they use animated armor stats, except they're elementals instead of constructs. And they're pretty resistant to damage. So, you know, if you're just plinking on them with a sword, even though a lot of the characters are now starting to get magical weapons. Finally, they're like 5th level, and they're finally starting to get a little bit powerful, which I'm fine with because the Out of the Abyss should not feel like you're super powerful for the first part. I think in the second part, maybe a little bit more, but the first part is more survival horror, you know, we're getting by the seat of our pants kind of thing. Okay, let's see what other notes I have here. I forgot to mention that last session, after they cleansed the temple and went back to Gurnik, it's one of those instances in Blingdenstone where they get a chance to raise their social standing. So, and they did a group morale check, and I'm still giving disadvantage to the Drow because there's a Drow player, and Drow and Deep Gnomes are not. They don't mix well. The Deep Gnomes really don't like Drow, but they managed to. They succeeded. So they took. There's 3 tracks of social interaction, and they started on like basically hostile. The Deep Gnomes are kind of tolerating them because the chief said they could be here. And then they moved up, I think, to indifferent. And then once they move up, there's one more rank they can get up to, which is friendly. And at friendly is pretty much when the chiefs, the 2 Diggermatoks will say, okay, here's a route you can take to the surface. That's kind of how I'm playing it by ear. But I still want them to do, there's still a lot around Blingdenstone I want them to do to help get them experience before they leave and get ready for the second part of the adventure. I'm hoping to have them to 7th level, but I'd like to, you know, I want them at least at 6th, and they just made 5th not that long ago. And the adventure kind of assumes you're at 7th level on the flip side when you come in back in for the second part of the adventure. And as other people have recommended, in which I could easily do, in between the 2 parts of Out of the Abyss, I may run a mini adventure just to change the tone of things a little bit for a couple of weeks, and maybe get them up to level 7. You know, have an above ground adventure before they go back in. You know, just give them a little bit of break, because we've been in the Underdark for a long time. But we'll see. We'll play that by ear how it happens. Another thing I do, vicious mockery. One of my players plays a bard, and they keep doing the vicious mockery, and that's starting to do so. I think they killed one of the gargoyles with vicious mockery. It's at 5th level, vicious mockery starts going to 2d8. That's not bad. So I was, you know, because I was like, vicious mockery, it's kind of helpful, but it's kind of, you know, But if it's successful, then not only does the opponent take psychic damage, but they get disadvantage on their next attack. So 5th level above, vicious mockery from the bard, you know, starts, you know, he's like, you know, you're an idiot, you're an idiot, you're an idiot, and you know, it starts really doing something. I just made a note of that to mention. And my bard's good at coming up with insults. He's very creative with that kind of thing. So, and then what I finally decided on in Blingdenstone period, because it clearly states at the Caves of Clatter that that custom weapons and armor, and there's only so many weapons and armor that you can buy instantly at the Caves of Clatter. Everything else has to be custom made. And, you know, I just looking at these custom rules for making stuff, and it seems like it would just take a really long time. I don't know how many different Deep Gnomes are working on it, this and that. I said 3 days. You know, because that's what I threw out there off the cuff for the silver weapons that they ordered, which they finally got. And, you know, they ordered those on purpose because they know that they've got to deal with were-rats. A little bit of metagaming, but also I guess that makes sense because some of these characters would know, hey, were-rats, were-creatures, we need silver. I'm fine with that. I just said 3 days at that time, but then, you know, I went and looked, and I kept looking, and you know, instead of trying to calculate all this stuff and and how many, I just said 3 days. So that's how I handled it. If the characters want to order custom stuff. Now another thing I did because it specifically states that in the Caves of Clatter, which is where you can buy and sell weapons and armor in the Rockblight, it specifically says that stuff is forged and traded here, or you can custom order. Now it says traditional Sverfneblum, which is deep gnome arms, including picks, darts, and daggers, along with ringmail, scale mail, and chainmail shirts, are forged and traded here. I just went ahead and expanded traded to, I mean, because weapons are going to be traded in and out of here. So I gave my characters, I said, I'll give you a 30% chance to find any weapon or item that you need here, non-magical, without having to have it custom ordered. You still have to play double because it says prices for weapons and armor are double those listed in the player's handbook. But I give you 30% chance of just finding it without having to have it custom ordered. So that was something I just kind of threw in there. The other thing I did is one of my characters way back at the beginning had when I said you start the adventure with none of your equipment, because that's how Out of the Abyss starts. You start with nothing, no matter what you thought you bought or purchased or this or that, or you start with nothing. You're in your undergarments as a slave prisoner. He had said, well, my uncle gave me a rapier, and there was also a musical instrument that he mentioned. And I said, okay, so I made a note of that, and I told him. After, at the end of the last session, I said, in the back of your mind, it suddenly occurs to you, did I see a familiar blade in the Caves of Clatter? And he was like, oh. So that's just a nice role-playing note. I'm going to allow him to find that rapier got into the Underdark economy from him being captured, and it has showed up here in the Caves of Clatter, and he can go try to buy it. Now I'm going to have a nice role-playing experience. I'm going to let him buy it, but I'm going to have a nice little role-playing exchange on that. Oh, I really like this. I don't want to let it go, and then, all that. But it'll be fun. So, players, always give your DMs notes about your backstory or this or that or the other from your player or from your characters, because we'll try to work it in if we can. And in this case, it made sense once I thought about, it says weapons are traded here. I think I'm going to have this rapier show up because it's a good player, very creative player, and I want to reward their creativity. So this is a good opportunity to do that. So other than that, I think it's it. I'll look forward to updating you next time. Thanks so much for watching. I always look forward to your questions and comments. So please leave questions, comments on this video. Leave it a thumbs up. That helps me a lot. Tell your friends, your D&D and RPG friends about this series if they don't know already. People seem to enjoy it, and I appreciate that. And, make sure to leave us a thumbs up on YouTube, and we will catch you next time on Shameplace.